Is there any problem with tofu?
Yeah, I wonder if there's like.
If you're,
Yeah,
if you have, if you have,
see, probably the same as like the pill.
if you're dying now, like, I know, guys, it's like, there's studies.
All right, I think what we'll do, I like to try to get started now, just to give us a little bit extra time.
I need to stop.
And since the beginning of the session is really just my, little bit of my own introduction, so it's not as important. Over the last week or so, I've been able to have a real opportunity to kind of view all of the sessions and the interaction that has been going on during the course. And it's just been, it's been incredible. You know, there are very few courses that I've ever taught or been involved in where I've learned so much from the course while being the putative instructor. So it's been, and I think that that's really the essence of this experience, is that it's really been very effective in breaking down where we get our information from and who teaches who. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and just to kind of put that into some sort of perspective. You know, we've had a great opportunity to have a variety of people who were involved with 9/11 to visit with us, to talk to us, and to learn with us. You know, these included, you know, responders, their families, included various experts in a variety of fields, whether it's legal or in terms of public policy. And each of us came here, and of course students, and each of us came here with our own little perspective, with our own way of looking at the world, with all of our preconceived notions of an event that was really transformational to our society. And it was really quite different. You know, everybody had their own perspective. And during the course of the discussion, what I saw was that the responders who were here, they were able to impart a tremendous amount of information. But at the same time, there was a therapeutic effect that occurred as a result of their participation in the educational experience. That they were able to be responders again by being able to impart that information. And then at the same time, when they were asked questions or where they were being challenged, I looked at that video with Dr. Abed, and she gave her testimony as to what her experience was on 9/11 in Saudi Arabia. I could see the fire in the eyes of a lot of responders. But at the end of the day, there was communication that was set up, and there was a certain healing that was occurring as a result of this very frank and honest exchange of information. And you could think of this over and over and over again, about how we learn and where we get our, you know, how we progress as being professionals, as being doctors. And I hope that by the one thing that you get out of this course is really when you're dealing with your patients, that it's a real partnership. And there's a real exchange of information that's going on. The other thing that I just wanted to mention, because I was intrigued by it, is that you all read the various testimonies in the book. And around you are people who participated in those original testimonies in the book you're now leaving. And what was interesting to me was that how often those testimonies at that time were different than what you're hearing when you're in a seminar. And there's a basic tension about what people tell you as physicians in private and what they tell you in public. And so, by getting those two, I hope the students realize what a privileged position you've been in about hearing these things from these two different dimensions. And this is something that you always have to respect as physicians. That's probably the greatest privilege that you will have, is that so often people will be able to coming to you and telling you things that they will not tell anyone else. And you always have to not only respect it, but honor it and learn how to deal with it. And I'm not going to go into that particular aspect, but I think that this has been a wonderful experience in terms of that. And I hope you kind of all realize that, because it's really, it's very special to have that. So today is our last session, and we have a great turnout of people. I think we have 100% attendance by the students, which is very unusual for a course at the university. I'm here. That's kind of unusual also. And we have a great turnout of the responders and their families who came here to participate. And this session deals with the this personal and the spiritual. So what I'd like to do is maybe we could go around the table and have the various responders who are here just to introduce themselves. You'll be, I think that, and perhaps just to give a few lines as to what your role was on 9/11 and beyond. So Arthur, can you just introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dr. Arthur Goodian. I'm a podiatrist. A couple of weeks after 9/11, we actually established a podiatry office, so to speak, in St. Paul's Chapel, right across the street from Ground Zero. We actually worked in George Washington's pew, which was very interesting. We had supplies that were donated to us. And we took care of the ones who were the actual responders, the firefighters, the construction people, the people that were doing the cleanup. They would actually end up with foot and ankle problems that we as podiatrists would take care of. We actually established a service for 8 months, for the entire 8 months subsequent to 9/11, and worked 8-hour sessions. And I actually got a lot of people to come in as volunteers, as I was, and I was there for about 2 or 3 days a week for the entire 8 months, taking care of the responders, that came in from the pile, and later, from the recovery itself.
Thank you. Anne Marie?
My name is Anne Marie Bauman. I am not a first responder. I am the wife of a first responder. I am the Senior Vice President of the Fieldwood Foundation, who helps responders and their families.
Reverend Bill?
Reverend Bill Minson. I began work as a chaplain for the Red Cross 2 days after the attacks. I committed 5 years to work with the families. I worked, as I said, 5 months in all family assistance centers, then went to Ground Zero as a chaplain for the Salvation Army. Worked with them until the recovery ended. Continued providing spiritual care through my Today Ministries. And at the end of the 5 years, thought I was going back to my entertainment work, and discovered 300 or 400 responders had died. And it was shortly after that that I met John Field. I heard about the Feel Good Foundation, and to this day he is still the torchbearer for all 9/11 responders. And since my association worked with him, whenever he calls, I try to show up and be responsive to whatever we can do to assist responders and their families.
Thank you. John, what's his name?
John Field, 9/11 responder.
You met him.
Chris Malati, retired NYPD.
My name is Therese, and I was a licensed massage therapist down at Ground Zero. I was able to organize over 400 chiropractors, massage therapists, and physical therapists to work on the rescue workers the days following 9/11.
My name is Rob Weisberg. By trade, I'm an accountant, but I'm also a volunteer firefighter. And basically, I was underneath the towers when the first plane hit. Checked in with my office, they all knew my background. I said, I'm going to respond to 10 House across the street from the Trade Center. Talked to the captain there. His guys were all out at another call. He said, you're all I got. And I said, because I said to him, you can use me, great. If not, I'll get out of your way, because he doesn't know me from any, He said, you're all I got. You're in charge of triage. And took it from there. I continued down there until the end of May 2012.
How you doing? Chris Bauman, Amber's husband, NYPD. I was there that day, a couple of minutes after the first hit until about 6 p.m. on site, and saw everything.
Oh, I'm Ken George, work for New York City DOT. I was called down there on search and rescue. Was down there for a couple of months. I helped, look for anybody that was alive there, and just try to help people out when I can.
Roberta, just want to introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. This was the only class I could come to. My name is Roberta Ridgen. I'm with, FOB, friend of Ben's, colleague, and devotee of this project. And thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll get started. I think what we'll do now is we'll just see a short video of some of the testimony that we had, just to kind of get some focus, and then we'll go into some of the students have put together some questions at this session as well as previous sessions that we thought we would like to work through and hear the discussion about.
My friend asked the question, where was Link? Was he home? Was he working? So we called his house, and his wife at the time told us he was working. Didn't know where he was, and that was our motivation to go in there. We knew we were going to find a lot of rubble. We were hoping to find Link. That's our main concern. We didn't know what the place looked like. We didn't know the devastation. We had no idea. We didn't know if there were barriers that would prevent us from going in. We had a goal, we had a purpose. So we went down, and we got there sometime in the afternoon. As we got closer and closer to the actual site, everything went from green street signs, red billboards, and everything just got gray. And it was gray, we realized later on, from the dust that settled. Watching it on TV afterwards, you see the cloud of dust as the buildings come down. The cloud just was immense. Nothing was colored anymore. Everything was just gray. And as we approached the scene, there was a lot of lights. The whole place was lit up. And where we expected to see two tall buildings, we just saw a skeleton. How could this happen? The most powerful nation in the world, how could this happen? Why would anyone want to do this? Why would anyone want to bring a giant to its knees and prove a point by killing innocent people? Not just firefighters. I mean, we expect to die at some point in time in a tough, mean manner, because that's the nature of the job. We expect it. We don't want to go, but if it happens, it happens. And we're prepared for it, for the most part. I don't think firefighters are really afraid of death in any way. But these are innocent people who got up, went to work, earned a living to put food on their table, many with wives and children and grandchildren. Lots of stories came out of that where people should have been there and weren't there because of one reason or the other. But these are innocent people. And that got us really angry. But it didn't stop us from saying, hey, remember the purpose, we need to go find Link. So we went down to the 10 house, which is engine 10, ladder 10. This is right at the base of the World Trade Center, just south of it, I think. And we went in there, and the guys there welcomed us. They gave us packs of gloves. It was pouring rain. Everything was soaking wet. They gave us gloves and dust masks, a little painter's mask, little throwaway things. That's all they had. They gave us tools if we needed tools, Hurst tools, screwdrivers, whatever we needed. And we had some refreshments. I had some water, and shoved our pockets with extra bottles of water, and went to work on the pile right outside the 10 house.
Did you ever find Link?
We didn't, but our brothers did. I believe he was found sometime in November of that year. And we brought him home and put him to rest.
I could not believe it. When we first, when we got in there, we saw police everywhere. There, it looked like a ghost town, though, for people-wise, regular civilians. It was just closed down. And I remember pulling in there, and you could see some of the smoke rising, and they had things set up. But when we got out, and the smell, I'll never forget the smell. It was just, it's hard to describe it. I'll never forget it. It was just death. You realize that, it was worse than what they showed you on TV. I didn't realize the whole sense of loss yet. I figured, all right, it's, I'm thinking it's the houses, the firehouses, and maybe the policemen and a lot of people from Manhattan. I didn't think of the response that they pulled everybody. And we got to this one firehouse, and we were greeted by a lot of the wives. There was only, I think, a house watch fireman there because the other guys were down. And we found out that they lost their truck and 11 guys. And the wives were just amazing. They're like, eat, they took care of us, they talked to us, they welcomed into the firehouse. The firemen weren't there, even the one guy that was the house watch guy, he was, he was there. You could see he was like numb, Neighbors started bringing flowers and putting them outside and lighting candles in front of the firehouse. What I saw of 9/11 is that the people came together. Even in my neighborhood, I saw people coming together in the country where I think I'm still chasing that. That people didn't matter anybody's race or creed or what you believed in. We came together. I mean, even one day I was, I directed traffic. I was assigned to the PD, sent us out, and I was directing traffic. There was going to be a fireman's funeral. And so we closed off one of the streets by Rescue 1. And I had people, come up. Here I am in a sheriff's department uniform, I'm in the city, you know what I mean? Sheriff's department truck, out of the city. And people are coming up, you want water? You need a sandwich, you know what I mean? Complete strangers just trying to help out. You know what I mean? Not just because I was, but you see other people, you know what I mean? People weren't cutting everybody, it was just an amazing time that I'll never forget. The country came together, and I'm still chasing that. I'm still chasing that to this day.
Everybody wanted to do something, and this is not just in New York. I mean, this was actually around the country. The setup down at St. Paul's Chapel worked out very well for us. There was an actual pew that was George Washington's pew. That was his private pew where he was inaugurated and prayed, and it was a blocked off area at the side of the chapel, and we actually converted that into a podiatry office. We put in treatment chairs. We had a big shelf around with all kinds of medications, injectables, anything that was needed. Everything that we used was actually donated by the college and by supply houses, medical supply houses. Shoe companies were sending in boots and socks, and anything we needed, we could just send out an inquiry, and people were just willing to donate anything. The chapel itself, the atmosphere was emotional but uplifting. It was just something where you became a family. And there were banners. Kids' schools were sending in banners. Every inch of that chapel had banners, had posters, had letters written by the kids to the firefighters and to the people who were, helping. People who came in that were actually working in the pit itself had a place that they could come in. They actually had cots set up all around the periphery of the chapel. They could rest for as long as it was necessary. They would get up and pretty much go back out again. There was an upstairs balcony area which we used for all the supplies that were being sent in and donated. And there were musicians, actual musicians that came in and pretty much all day long would actually be in the other side of the chapel, just playing soothing music, constantly. And they were also, volunteers from Lincoln Center and from other, private groups. I had podiatrists that volunteered coming in from California, from the states out west. They would pay their own way. They would fly in. They would take either hotels or stay with people, but everything was on their own. Everything was totally voluntary. The commonality was the fact that we all had the same feeling of a tragedy happened, but we're there to do whatever we can to get past it and to make it an uplifting experience and to, just do what you felt that you could do to help the situation.
Do you consider your husband a hero?
You know what, I tell the kids, I use that word for the kids because I think to the kids it's a little uplifting. To me, I kind of say it, but I know my husband loved his job. And up until the end, he said, Greta, I just want to get better so I can go back to work. That was what kept him going. He loved his job. Like, to me, that's not being a hero. I will never forget the people that died that day. I'll never forget all the people who have died since. I know many of them personally. I know their stories. I know their children. I know their parents. I know their spouses. They were very, very special people. Very special. Not just people who went through life saying, oh, whatever. These are people that really cared.
All right. So where's Justin? Oh, okay, Justin. So why don't you lead us off in our discussion with that the first question about Reverend Harris, who was the priest at St. Paul's.
Of course. Okay, so Reverend Harris talks about how many people can recollect the events of 9/11 in vivid detail, yet fail to remember 9/12, which he describes as the day of courage and compassion. Do you think this is true? And do you think that the memory of 9/12 could help in the emotional and spiritual healing process?
So we have Reverend Minson here, who can perhaps, maybe you can expound upon that as far as that sentiment of
Well, before you answer
Father-
that, are you asking the 9/11 community, or are you asking,
well, this is a
are you asking
discussion.
America at large?
No, we're not asking America. We have just the people here. We're going to be having, so, Reverend,
Well, I would say that, of course, it's going to help tremendously. I remember 9/12. I think probably people in New York, the country, and around the world were still in shock, trying to absorb what had happened. And I recall going down to the Armory, and people were just in the street, and that was, of course, where you were seeing people holding faces. Have you seen this person? And of course, the Boston bombing recently brought back the fact that our way of life not only changed on 9/11, but it's now taken another leap because we no longer enjoy the freedom that we did here. And we have a lot of disgruntled people in America. We don't have to worry so much about outside of America. The Oklahoma City bombing is evidence that we can be our own worst enemy also. I think the other thing is that we immediately saw, even in shock, the response that you see from people when something happens. As the woman said, people began to, or whoever was on the video, said people began to bring food to the fires. They began to, you want to do something to respond. And whatever that is. A couple of weeks ago, there's an issue about postal service on Saturday, and I attended a rally for the postal workers in Los Angeles. And I thank them for bringing all the mail that used to come to the Family Assistance Centers, pictures from little children, school children, letters from people, cards, encouraging the responders, encouraging people that had to work, that had to be there and deal with it. So we see the best of us, unfortunately, come out of the worst situations. But it does remind us of what we're capable of, and maybe we will start to respond that way without the disaster aspect.
One of the things I was thinking about in terms of
just speak loudly.
yeah, sure. The final essay, one of the questions that the students have to write on is the fallout of on the first responders and other people that were very involved in the rescue, recovery, and cleanup effort after 9/11. And I was thinking that something that I think sustained them during the immediate period after 9/11 was everybody came together, and that there was so much rallying and a united effort. Like the man just said on the video, like he missed that community feeling, and then that faded. And I think part of the fallout and part of the post-traumatic stress and the trauma, and maybe even part of the health consequences, stress lowers your immune system, and so you're more susceptible to poor health, happened because we lost that over time. And if we could somehow, I don't know how, but somehow keep that spirit alive, I think that would have negated a lot of the negative outcomes that happened after.
Arthur, you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I could. We actually did maintain a lot of that, I guess if you want to call it camaraderie, subsequent to actually working down there for that 8-month period, because that was the main time that we were all down there. And right now, the community, at least from St. Paul's Chapel and some of the other centers of responders, we actually still get together. We still meet all these years. It's been 11, 12 years now. And at least once or twice a year, and certainly on 9/11, we actually spend a day down there again. We get together. We commiserate, we talk, we find out how some of us are doing. On a personal basis, I'm still going down to Mount Sinai 3 times a month for what I developed because of all of that. You know, we were told, of course, that the air quality was good by the EPF. Apparently it wasn't. And I have to get intravenous for my immune system. I have to get inhalers, and my lungs and my sinuses and nasal passages are pretty well shot. I'm under control, but it's something that we all deal with, on a daily basis ever since that time. But we get together and we talk about it. We see how the families are doing, and we see who's still with us. And it's still a feeling of something that we were able to do, and we're still, to some extent, proud of it, and to some extent, we just still wish it never had to have been that way. But the feeling is still there, and if there's a touch of PTSD along with it, we deal with it.
Well, this is really a good segue, because I think one of the things that Arthur brought up and that was really brought up was really what are the constituents of distrust. What are the you have the positive things that occur in terms of patriotism and sense of community and altruism and all of those very positive attributes that sustain us. But what are the things that detract from that? And I thought that Aaron, if you just go through your first question, I'll just jump down to your question really about that. That whole issue.
Sure. You're talking about the third one here. So in our class, which is actually based off of, we are reading a novel called The Anatomy of Hope. And I took a passage from it. It says that each disease is uncertain in its outcome. Within that uncertainty, we find real hope, because a tumor has not always read the textbook. A treatment can have an unexpectedly dramatic impact. This is the great paradox of true hope, because nothing is absolutely determined. There's not only reason to fear, but reason to hope. I kind of said that because many of our responders we talked about, they actually had some really ambiguous medical conditions, both physically and mentally, as Arthur just talked about, and that you face some uncertainty about what's going to happen afterwards in the environment. What I wanted to know is, do you believe that hope changes outcomes afterwards?
Well, I just want to, because I'm going to revise the question a little bit, because I read it and I thought, well, that was a great question. I really enjoyed it. But I wanted to say that just the second part of your question, I said many of our responders experience ambiguous medical conditions, both physically and mentally, because this is the first time that this type of toxicity was ever really occurred. They also faced uncertainty regarding their exposure to the toxic environment, its risks, and the way in which they would receive subsequent care. How do you believe your personal hope post 9/11 has changed your physical, mental, and social outcomes? How did public and social policy impact your sense of health? And that goes really to, I just wanted to just reiterate Arthur's point, and this is kind of, I wanted to hear what the students have to say about it. When you're given the information from the EPA, does that contaminate the well? Does that really, can you believe in hope anymore when you really don't know? So maybe, Aaron, maybe you can answer your own question, or this revised question.
I don't really have a good answer. I really planned this for responders to fill in.
Gee, thanks.
Not gonna lie. I think it's stemming from knowing that we had a great deal of reading. We talked a bit in our classes. We had small group sessions for MCS class where we described different ways and where hope changes some outcomes. I was more interested in what people would have to say as a combination, as well as some responders. Maybe some physicians did some things, or maybe if a physician gave you hope, or if they had a positive attitude, and how that helped you out as well.
Well, here you had these, maybe they weren't physicians, but you had experts. You had authorities. You had people you had faith in and confidence in, and they were giving you information that turned out to be misinformation.
Yeah, you don't want to confuse hope and trust. Okay? I think
Oh,
that's
that's a
safe
good
to say.
point.
We trust the government to give us real information. They told, we asked point blank, is the air safe? They said yes. They knew it wasn't. So then trust is gone. The hope, the way I look at hope is, I got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. My hope is I'll be around for them. Two different hope and trust. You can't, they're different.
I think anybody down there knows that if they could have told us anything. But when you're working on that pile and blood's pouring out of your nose and you're throwing up, we knew what was down there was really bad. They could have told you, oh, it's gonna be fine. We all knew it was horrible. And I think that nothing happened until Feel Good Foundation and the monitoring program. I think that put a lot of faith, back into us to help us, because the amount of medicines that, we all have to take now and stuff, and just to be treated with respect. Like, when I walk into the monitoring unit, it's like, you almost feel like you're a celebrity. They treat you so great, that definitely gives us hope. I wish they were trying to help us more, like doing something experimental. Really think out of the box, instead of just throwing medicines at us and watching what happens, Like that, what was that thing, John, you got that chamber, it's little stupid things like trying different things.
The wellness
that-
pod, yeah.
Yeah, just trying different things that, you can really make a breakthrough, because this is gonna happen again. Look, Boston,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen again,
So John, what motivated you? And now we got you on the spot. Here you spent the last 12 years of your life, or at least the last 11 years of your life.
Well, how tall is tall, how fat is fat. Everybody's perception is different. So when it comes to hope and belief, whatever, I think everybody's outcome is going to be different. On a whole, I think the fraternity, the 9/11 community is fragile, physically and mentally. Physically because of our illnesses, and mentally because of our post-traumatic. I have a tendency to let things slide off my shoulders because I'm in the eye of the storm, and I get most information before the 9/11 community gets it. The problem is most guys and women that are homesick, they get bits and drabs of information that isn't always the correct information. But for years they said we were crying wolf when we were sick. They said, you're not sick, you're lying, you're making it up. So for years we were crying wolf. In fact, the wolf ate us, because the wolf is basically 9/11 related cancer and all of those serious illnesses that are killing everybody now. So you're 12 years later, and most 9/11 responders have a very bitter taste in their mouth because of the lack of, every issue, if you take 9/11 across the board and you think of every issue, there's a lack of sensitivity towards how people react to their illnesses, and they can't work, and they can work half the time, or they need to take so much medication. So unless you're actually that responder and in that household environment, you really don't know what they're going through. And it's painful for us, me and Amory and the rest of the Feel Good Foundation, to see. So if you go back to your first question, do you think the memory of 9/12 and the emotional spirit? Listen, if you're a 9/11 responder, you know what you were doing on the 12th. People watching it on TV, they don't know. They're not going to remember that. They're going to remember 9/11 and where they were, and rightfully so. The human spirit, the true human spirit, is to feel other people's pain or feel if they're happy. If everybody in this room was having a good time, I'd be in a good mood. If everybody was sad, I'd probably be sad. So it's the truth. That's what separates us from other animals. We can understand emotion. So 9/11 was the single largest act of volunteerism since the World War. Since the Civil War. Civil War is the single largest act of volunteerism ever. So on 9/11 and 9/12, 9/13, everybody came together. Everybody was patriotic. Everybody helped each other out. But because of poor leadership and bad politics, we're back where we were on 9/10. We're really not giving a crap about each other in society. And I say that as, in my mind, the most patriotic person I know.
Do you think just to open this up as a question, do you think that as a nation, we've really come to grips with 9/11? Or did we, quickly move away from it, from all of its true ramifications and its impact?
We quickly moved away. Amazingly, blinding speed moved away from it.
I disagree. Rightfully, respectfully, Bill.
We, on 9/11, saw what happened. We then saw the Christie Todd Whitman, the air is fine.
Yeah.
That was the first breach. But the most egregious was when they discovered how sick the responders were. And Feel Good Foundation led a charge against Congress for years, 7 years, maybe 8 years, beginning around $11 billion that was cut down eventually to $4.2 billion to help these responders with the promise that we'll go get more money. These are our legislators that we depend upon. It was an egregious failure then. It's a more egregious failure now. We moved away from it very quickly. It was also suppressed heavily in the media so that many people across this country have no idea to this day of the suffering that these responders and their families are experiencing. I talked to them in California and other parts of the West Coast. It was deliberately suppressed because part of forcing Congress to support the efforts that the American people would have insisted upon the same way they responded on that day. If the American people didn't know, then they couldn't respond. The media was controlled deliberately, and they were able to keep this battle going, keep reducing the funds, supply as little as possible. And you ask yourself, for a firefighter in California who sees what happens in New York, why would I go put my life at risk, my family's future at risk, knowing how difficult it's going to be for my family to make it because my government is not responding?
Yeah, but you didn't answer the question.
Yeah, but
Well, everything you said was correct, but you didn't answer the question. You cannot look, these kids are in this room today to talk about 9/11, so they obviously have not forgot about 9/11. But if Bob, the pharmacist, went to work at CBS on September 8, 2006, he didn't forget about 9/11. He's just got a life to live. I can't fault anybody for moving on. That's another human reaction, to move on after a good event or a bad event. So you can't ask every American to wallow in pity for us.
No, I disagree with you, because when I see on television that we lost 5 servicemen in Afghanistan yesterday, but we routinely sit down at our dinner tables, see on the news that we've lost a serviceman, and it means
Yeah,
nothing
but
to us.
that's a different issue.
America
got dumbed down by a boss in a picture.
9/11 no different. It started that war. And we as Americans need to remember, when we have people on the front lines, certain things are not to be forgotten if there's work to still be done.
Again, you're 100% right.
Yeah, I think actually you're just talking a little bit off of one another, a little bit different perspective, but I think we've heard you, and I.
Let Boston be a reminder that 9/11 can happen again. We take our freedom for granted. We take the freedom that the soldiers are providing in the Mideast right now for granted.
Absolutely.
Because we wake up in the morning, we have a bowl of Cheerios, we go to the gym, we go to work, we go to school, we go to Stony Brook, we're gonna be doctors. We take it for granted. So until something happens in your immediate community or immediate family, you take it for granted. Well, it didn't happen to me, it's sad that it happened to somebody else. Oh my God. That's just the way society and environment is set up. And we can argue that. I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. It burns me. It burns me to see that people are suffering and they're being forgotten. Hence why we continue to fight.
I think it'd be interesting to hear from some of the students on this, as most of you are much younger. So your perception of 9/11 is very different than I think some of the responders who were right there and do have these strong memories. It would be interesting to hear what you think about how the country has moved on, or from maybe your generation, based on what you know.
Well, I think one of the great tragedies of 9/11 is how it was politicized. I think that it became something that politicians were using against one another in order to win votes, in order to score kind of political wins. I think that was that, and I think that just how the media kind of was responding to 9/11 with all the sensationalism, with all the just over the top. I mean, they kept showing the same images of the planes going into the towers, which, yes, that's a very, very poignant and horrific image. But also the images of firefighters and communities coming together, that kind of went to the wayside. And I think that that's something that it's tragic to me that's kind of been forgotten. That's what I'm talking about with 9/12. With it's been enough time later that the image in a lot of people's minds for 9/11 is the plane sitting in the tower. Not all of the people coming together, handing out water bottles, fixing their feet, massaging them. That's something that I think is hard to kind of.
I'd like to respond to that question. You're talking 9/12.
9/12. And just the.
It's hard. I'm not going to speak for all the responders that were down there. But like John said, everyone knew where we were the day after 9/11. And it's hard for the responders, or for me personally, to talk to anyone about what we saw, what we heard, what we smelled while we were down there. So for me to have a conversation with my friends or my family who were not down there, it's like pointless because they have no idea what it was like down there.
That's true.
And as far as trying to get, so it's even though you're trying to look for hope, for me there's not a hope because I don't want to say there's not a hope. It's just a different level of understanding that is just so far reached for me as a responder down there for 2 or 3 months, not being able to talk to anyone about, like I couldn't have a conversation with you. I'd like to educate the physicians and the doctors in the medical field what it was like down there. In fact, I volunteer at the World Tribute Center doing tours on 9/11 at the Memorial Plaza. And my thing for that is to not have anyone forget what it was like down there post 9/11 in the days following. Because people now see that memorial as a clean construction site. That was nothing like what it was the days following. Like everyone's saying, there was papers there was pictures there were body parts there, the pit was there. Trying to explain that to a group of medical students, or even just my friends and family, they weren't there, they don't understand. So the question for me as far as, what would it be like, people remembering the compassion, yeah, I remember people cheering us on, but for us responders, they were thinking we were heroes. We weren't heroes, we were just doing our job, we were focused, and we had to get down and do what we had to do. Like I say in my portion, it was like a family in a city within a city. We had no idea what time of day it was because of the lighting, the darkness. We had no idea what it was like to be normal again outside that city. So to sit and have conversations with people who weren't down there, for me, and I think a few other people, because sometimes I think like Arthur said, he'll get together with some people. I stay in touch with the iron workers who came from Chicago and a couple of the machine operators. And it's even kind of dwindling away because it's cathartic because it's good to talk to someone who was down there at the time, who understood what we were going through. But yet it's hard because, like even coming here today, it was so hard. It was bringing up memories. It was anxiety. I was having difficulty breathing. So it's like I don't want to relive it again, but I do have this passion of making sure everyone knew what it was like there the day after, and the days and months following what the responders went through down there. So for us to just think like, is there hope? I don't want to eliminate that we don't have hope. But it's just very difficult for me to describe what it was down there to someone who was not down there. So that hope it doesn't even fit my equation. Like, how do you talk about hope on 9/12?
In some ways, you have a paradox that you're living with. On the one hand, you don't want that this is extremely painful for you, but until you think that you or even the whole society can go through the healing process that it needs to go through, that can occur until people are cognizant and deal with 9/11. All these people, you have the general population who just, I don't want, there's a certain willfulness about not wanting to know, but you can't allow, the actual healing won't occur until that interaction occurs and that people confront the issues of 9/11. And not only the medical and psychiatric and social issues that occurred to the responders, but the greater issue of, you know, the great existential issues of 9/11, you know, where we had hell on earth in the middle of our nation, you know, that occurred, you know, that this was, this evil, so do you think that there's a certain paradox to it? Don't you think?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
You're talking about healing and how you're gonna heal, but how do they heal it? I get phone calls, even at the picnic. There's responders at the World Trade Center, the picnic, once the barbecue starts, they're done. They're sitting as far away as they can. It's like those triggers are always there for them. If a fire truck goes by fast, some of them just go like this. It's talking 12 years later.
Right.
So is there a healing for that?
I think there's a healing,
Like,
there's
a
processes.
limit, there's just so far. I mean, it's an overabundance of them that still have these
The healing
triggers.
process is going to be the rest of our lives.
Yeah,
It's
that's
going
what
to
I'm
be
saying.
an
It's not something
ongoing
that's just
thing.
gonna
You gotta
happen.
understand,
Can't get that
you
out
know,
of your head.
some people got sick, they got divorced. Some people got sick, they went into rehab. Some people got sick, they lost everything. So while they all have the same common factor that 9/11 altered their lives, they all have different individual personal stories that are going to help them heal faster or heal slower. And it's different for everybody. But going back to the original, Julie said with today's youth, I think we skipped a generation because I believe today's youth is doing better than our generation. This generation now, you know, Amory, myself, and others, we go to a lot of schools. This Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be going to Boston to speak to some high school. I truly believe the younger generation gets better than our generation that was affected by 9/11. A lot of people wanted to forget about it, move on. I get it. Okay, I'm not going to point fingers at them. But today's generation, I truly believe that this generation is truly doing an outstanding job. And those who are going to be doctors and treat 9/11 responders, you're not getting John Smith, the carpenter who's coming in with an illness. You're getting a 9/11 responder who was part of something that was unprecedented. So everything you see from head to toe, this person's personality, his illness, is unprecedented. And you really have to do your homework on these cases. And I think that would make you a better doctor.
Yeah, we don't know how we're going to end up. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm going down 3 times a month to Mount Sinai to the program. Now, thank God they're paying for it for us because it would be a fortune. It's a good few $1,000s a month just in medications alone that we have to go through. The intravenous, I see these, the EOBs that come back from these insurance companies, and it blows my mind the amount of money that's being spent. But, I have to think myself, with my family, am I going to end up with lung cancer? Am I going to end up with some of these things? As further, because I read about all these friends and other people who develop these things over a period of years, and it's part of the mental aspect of it. Do you know how you're going to end up? It's a tough situation.
It's funny how it looks like if you look at your illnesses, it's like a dam, and there's holes, and you plug up a few, you get this under control, this under control, this under control, and then something else happens, and then something else happens, and then you try to get that under control, and then this problem. It's so hard to get it under control, the whole thing, because once you think you do, now what is it? Like then you have something else going on. Like what the hell is this? It's incredible. Like the whatever was in that dust down there, it was probably a little bit of everything from asbestos to zebra juice or whatever. I swear to God, it was like a little bit of everything in there. I think it's affected every single thing about us. Because all the autoimmune stuff is popping up. We're not dying of cancer. Everybody I know has some kind of horrendous autoimmune stuff and we're on cancer medication anyway,
Yeah.
It is also a big fear in the 9/11 community, and when I say fear, every 9/11 responder is looking over their shoulder. The illness that I just got, which I never had before, is that 9/11 related. Yeah. And listen, if me and Amory had $1 for everybody that called us and said, my doctor from the clinic said he's never seen nodules like this, or they've never seen this kind of asthma. I got asthma on steroids. I have the worst GERD ever in the history of GERD. I mean, so what we see is people panicking 12 years later because they were never used to being sick, and sick to this extent where no one's ever seen anything like it.
And the death rate is going up
Yep.
and up and up.
And then the medications you take to get yourself fixed has a side effect. So besides getting all the 9/11 illnesses, the medicines you're taking are messing you up even more on top of that, you know?
Justin, you have a...
I was just, I mean, it seems like they still don't know exactly what was in the air. I mean, we know the air was bad. There was a lot of toxins and carcinogens in the air, but it wasn't, I don't think, has there really ever been a true breakdown?
Yeah, sure, they know what was in the air. They just, nobody ever went to school for everything combined that was in the air.
Okay.
It was,
What'd you say,
is it
John? Was
almost-
crossbones?
No cocktail like that.
Would it be almost worse would it be better if it was
Yeah.
something where it was like almost like a Chernobyl kind of a thing, where you knew it was like radiation, gotta take iodine to
one
prevent
treated, yeah.
one thing? Is it kind of like there's just seems to be like there's this waiting game, kind of
I
like
think it's
you
the
like you're plugging the
science-
holes and you know that something's going to happen, but you don't know where and what.
Yeah.
Is
I
that,
don't know,
is that,
man. There was green
To
smoke
me, it's
coming
just
out of the
trying to
ground.
help
There
with the
was
signs and symptoms
everything.
you get. And every, like John was saying, everyone has a different sign and symptom.
Well, that's why they're
And let's
developing
talk and say-
statistics with these monitoring programs that we all still go to. They're trying to develop statistics to see if they can determine possibly
We're not
what's
gonna
happening.
deal with it too much, but we were fortunate to have Dr. Brahmat here in the beginning, who basically had done all the work on, a lot of the work on 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. And part of it really goes back to the, I'll just make one comment, part of it goes back to the whole issue of trust. Throughout your life, everybody who lives is going to get sick. That's the nature of life, is that you're going to get ill. But when you're given misinformation and you breach the issue of trust, then everything that happens to you, you begin to attribute to an event. It's because you can't believe the authority any longer. So that's really one of the great fallouts of this whole issue of the lack of integrity of the EPA. When all of a sudden that happens, then they lose their credibility and no one ever can believe them again. The very government that's supposed to give you, they're supposed to help you and support you, they are very begrudging in terms of trying to give you that support. If you know that you're in an adversarial relationship with them, it undermines the very trust. And this is what is happening. It's not that everything can be attributed to 9/11, but in the minds of people who have been dealt with in the way that they've been dealt with, they will attribute it all to 9/11, because there's no one that's going to tell them any different, that the person in the government or in authority is going to tell them the truth. And so this causes a tremendous amount of problems and issues for people. I really don't want to go into this a lot more, because there's a lot more I want to go in the positive side. And that was what Christine said at the beginning. And she said, I was down there and we knew it was really bad. But you stayed down there and you did what you did. And I wanted to kind of...
The EPA guys, I ran into a million EPA guys down there, and they said, this is the worst we've ever seen, and they hand out you masks. Don't listen to what you hear on TV. Take this mask, wear it all the time. A million of guys, they're walking around with masks saying, this is horrible, this is bad. Then you go home and you listen to the news, and they said, oh, it's fine down there. We knew it was. They knew it wasn't, too.
Well, I remember, it's pretty funny, because when the EPA guys were down there, they were never on site without a mask. So that was kind of like a clue, like if they were something's wrong.
There was a dude,
Listen, you had
What's wrong with this picture?
you had a job to do, and whether you knew it in the back of your mind, the air was bad, and you were getting a runny nose in a day or two and a sore throat and your eyes were burning. You had a job to do, and that took precedent over everything. I have a job to do. I'm going to do the job the best of my ability. I'm going to go home sooner or later. That was the atmosphere there. That was on the back of the mind. Wow, man. I mean, there were people there eating hamburgers on the pile, drinking water. I mean, you were eating it. But at the end of the day, you had a job to do, and that's all that mattered at that time.
I think what you're saying is really important. You had a job to do, and you guys were lied to then, and you have to, you know, kind of beg for care that you need now. And I think we had to write a paper about the costs of 9/11. I think that's the greatest cost, that society has not changed and is making you, you know, you guys were there, you were doing your job, but now it's our turn to take care of you guys, and the cost of us not doing that correctly, and I don't think they are right now from what I've heard for the past 4 sessions, I think is a huge cost that I can't imagine how we're gonna pay that, you know, as a society. You know,
Let me ask you, why do we have centers of excellence?
Oh, no, I mean.
I know, but no,
yeah.
why do we have centers of excellence? Why do we have Mount Sinai? Why do we have Atlantia? Why do we have them? No one ever answered that question for me, and I'm just using you as an example. No one's ever apologized to the 9/11 responders. Nobody in Congress, nobody in the White House ever said, look, we're sorry, we lied. Christie was bad that day, she blah, blah, blah. Nobody ever said a full outright, nobody grew a set of Abe Lincolns and said, look, man, we dropped the ball, we're sorry, we made you guys sick. So instead, they created centers of excellence for us because they, without saying 9/11 made us sick, they made centers of excellence to treat us. So would they treat us for make-up illnesses? No, that was their way of saying sorry. We have centers of excellence that treat us. Society can never repay Chris Baumann, Ken George, anybody.
No, I don't think society should be able to repay, and
Nor
obviously
Congress.
people are doing great work at those centers of excellence, but I think
you're right.
we could take a step in the right direction by making it easier for you guys now, because you certainly made things
They make
easy.
you feel
You know,
guilty.
You allowed us to come together as a community afterwards. That wasn't
Yeah,
just
it's true.
all
Feel
how
guilty
great we are,
when
that's
you go
because we
down.
felt safer.
But as a society, we do that naturally. But as a government, that's just not gonna happen.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's not going to happen or whether we need to demand it, but I think that any of the other students want to kind of jump in and support your fellow
Colleague.
colleague, or, you know? Well, I think he's talking a very important issue.
She had her hand up.
Oh, go, here we go.
I mean, I just want to say that, like, first responders go, like Steve said, or in the video said that you're not scared of death and you're performing this duty that has to be done. You didn't have to choose, you know, that particular job, but you do, and society and the government owes it to first responders who are putting their lives on the line to take care of them and make sure that any problems that they incur, which, you know, are kind of, it's like, no, that you're gonna face dangerous situations. It's like, you know, if these people are doing this for society, then society really needs to take care of the first responders.
Right.
I think it's a given, it should be a given, I think it's crazy that it's not.
You're 1,000%
Right. I mean, and I think that the
Don't work
issue
that
is,
way.
it comes to an issue of reciprocity. You know, you know, you're doing this and you're, you know, the responder goes down, and for all the reasons that we mentioned, you know, I must say, you know, Teresa, that wasn't your job. You know, Teresa was a masseuse.
I remember.
I mean, why would, you know, there were other motivations and reasons why you went down there besides the fact that this was your job. But when people make that bet and they say, I'm going to go there and I'm putting my life on the line, there's a certain expectation. There's a certain expectation that you have of some sort of reciprocity, you know, that we live in a community. I'm going to do this. I'm putting my life on the line. You know, what do you expect?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I agree with John said. People showed up. There was a job to be done. They focused on doing the job. It was the aftermath that presented.
No, I'm talking about the social, not that it was expected at the time, but afterwards. I don't think, certainly I never thought that anyone that went down there and they put themselves on the line, that they would not be taken care of, or that the illnesses and whatever you know, you would have thought that this was just what we call in Jewish being a mensch.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody went down there knowing
Nobody thought
that
about
they
it.
would have to worry about
we didn't think of getting sick at all.
The presumption that would happen, you would have that presumption, okay?
Well,
I finished my work with the families. 1 week later, I'm a responder, found out 300 or 400 responders had died. I didn't know anything about it. So now, what does that tell you about people finding out what the truth is? I was flabbergasted. As John talks about, we have to go through this the rest of our lives. I volunteered to go to Ground Zero. I worked all the family assistance centers, went to Ground Zero 5 months later. Well, the fires didn't stop until 6 months later, okay? About 2 years ago, I woke up one day, couldn't walk up a flight of stairs. I called Anne Marie, I'm thinking I'm sick. Never thinking in the back of my mind, this could happen to me. So we have a collective group of people throughout America who are waking up hoping that one day this doesn't happen to me. Now, what happened to me, I still don't know what it was. It's never been defined. It went away. I'm running up and down stairs, thank God.
Are you in a
But,
screening program?
yeah, but now I'm thinking, I'm not thinking, I'm praying it doesn't happen again. But you never know, and this is what we have to deal with. So our presumption went out the window. And when you see the battle that Congress waged to not take care of these people, you cannot believe it. It's got to be a comic book story. You can't believe that much effort is made to stop people from being compensated, taken care of properly. It's amazing. It's an amazing American disgrace. And so many people.
The fact is that we went down there, we weren't thinking about getting sick, of course, but had they told us that we could get sick and given us these masks, none of us would have not done it anyway.
Right.
We would have done it with the masks. But subsequent to that, if it wasn't for John, seriously, we wouldn't even have the funds now to be taking care of
That's
ourselves.
true.
The fact that we had,
It was a team effort.
well, it was a team effort, but I'm saying, you took busloads of us up to, we went up,
Let's
how
break
many
that
times
down.
did we
You're
go to
talking about
Washington?
You're talking about getting compensated or being taken care of because you get sick. Before you should have been compensated, 9/11 responders or volunteers shouldn't have had to go through the mill to get the benefits that they paid in
That's
their
right.
whole career.
Yeah.
So whether it was workman's comp or social security, those are benefits that are given to everyday people that get hurt at Home Depot and a box falls on their head, whatever the case may be. 9/11 responders couldn't get that, let alone get compensated from a lawsuit or a bill. So again, going back to the whole theme of the process, these men and women have such a bitter taste in their mouth because of the lies, then the neglect, and then the denial, and then the uphill battles and the obstacles that they've had to fight every day.
And I'm taking the money.
Let's move on. I haven't, oh, go ahead.
I was also thinking about that because I wonder when we reflect on 9/11, we don't spend enough time thinking about like what lessons we should have learned. Like we should have known after that day and now that we do need to take care of people in the months and years to come. So we have the same problem with our veterans coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah.
And I just recently learned there's 900,000 backed up claims and the VA doesn't have the appropriate
Watch your Daily
system.
Show.
I do.
Yeah.
And like it frightens me that that's my news source. That watching a comedian talk about the real issues that people face, and because they're not part of our 15-minute news cycle on CNN that goes 24 hours a day, like we're hearing so much about the Boston bombing, but we're not hearing about like the people in the months of recovery they're going to have anymore. We're hearing about our people who stole a laptop, and I kind of want to hear about. It makes me feel that we haven't learned the lesson we should have learned.
Good point.
Can I give you a unique view of
Sure.
some of this?
Okay, go.
A lot of this you're talking about really doesn't pertain to me. I was only there that day, so I wasn't lied to that the air was clean or not. I got hurt that day, it was the last day I worked. And 9/12 I went blind, so I didn't see any of that community. But what I did see that day, and my wife can vouch for this, I hate when I'm called the hero. I hate when the firemen are called heroes and all that. We were paid that day to go there. That's why the city and the people paid us. We were paid to go there. Something bad happened, we weren't paid to run away, we were there to go there. What I saw that day when the towers fell, I saw a Joe Blow businessman who was not paid, stopping, picking up debris, picking up somebody who fell, hurt their ankle. The world was coming in. That day, the world was coming in. I saw how the world's going to end that day. I really did. I walked in and there's papers flying on fire, there's body parts all over, there's people screaming everywhere. And I saw so many common people. Joe Blow businessman has nothing to do with running to fires or running towards bullets, stopping and helping people. And these people are sick, and nobody looks at that. So many people that day. The days after, I can't say. I don't know the days after. I didn't see anything after 9/11. I was only there that day. the amount of people that should have just said, freak this and run. And people are coming to me, hurt ankles and all that. Officer, somebody needs you over there. I'll help her. I'll walk her. There was so many common people that should have just said, my God, you know what? I make $200,000 a year. What the hell am I doing here? I'm out of here. They stopped and they were picking up people, carrying people, picking debris off people. And the government and everybody doesn't see that. And so, you know, it wasn't just the people going afterwards. Everybody who went down there didn't care. If you ask any responder, if you know now, would you still go down there? You're going to get 100% say, I would still go down there. Because that's just our spirit. That's our spirit. That's our spirit. We talk about that a lot.
Yep.
That's our spirit. Even though we know everything that was bad down there, we would still go down there. But there's so many
Just do
people that
things
shouldn't,
differently.
that are unsung.
Yeah, exactly.
That the firemen and policemen always put on this pedestal. You go in there, fireman Joe Blow, cop so-and-so. I saw so many common people that should have just said, freak this, I got a yacht, you know, in Sag Harbor and all this. I don't need to
Look
be
at the
here.
Boston Marathon.
I mean, you can tell, they had three-piece
Strangers-
suits. You know,
Strangers ran towards.
you know, they had Rolex watches on, and they're sitting there, and they're full of dirt, they're bleeding themselves, and they're picking people up, and nobody really saw that, you know?
I think
That the-
it goes back to the first question that's really important is it's not just the memory of 9/12, it's actually what happened. That's what I think they're trying to get, this spirit, and something about our patriotism of being able to celebrate that and really encourage people to be that way on what Reverend Bill said, a daily basis. You know, and not to forget about that part of that we're all, that we're neighbors, that we're communities, and that we need to be able to rely on each other and not lose sense of that. And that's what we saw in
Oh, definitely. And how do you tell somebody who should have ran, who's now sick or seriously injured? You know, it's too bad.
You don't need 9/11 to call a cop or a firefighter a hero, though. They were a hero before 9/11. As soon as they put their
But the
badges
common
on.
person who shouldn't
No,
have been there,
9/11
should
put
have
you
ran
guys
his tail
on
off.
a grand
Those are the heroes.
stage.
So, Joe, what do you think? You're,
Well, one
very
thing I was
quiet
thinking
today.
about as John and the Reverend were talking is that I agree 100% that people sort of do forget this incident and, you know, episode in American history. And, you know, I was in high school when it happened. So, and I think, you know, some of my fellow students here may have been even younger than that. So we really have, you know, the perspective of somebody who observed this event from afar, or, you know, and that sort of allows us to be detached from it in some sense, unless they were, you know, personally affected by it. As, you know, Mary said her father was a responder. And I think, you know, us going forward in our careers, we have to sort of actively remember what happened here, because there's going to be exposure-related cancers that come about 20 years from now, and we're going to be treating these patients, and we have to be conscious of the fact of where the origins of, you know, their potential disease started, and it was 9/11. And without sort of advocates and people treating these patients with these facts in mind, I think a lot can be lost, and the lessons will not be learned.
I would have kind of, I'd like to move on. I think I was looking at some of the old questions, which I wanted to get to, and I love this story. It's probably one of the most popular stories that we hear about. And I think John Kristen brought it up originally. It was Christine's story. So I'll just read it. I think, John, I'm not trying to steal your thunder. It wasn't? No, all right. Whoever it is, not plagiarism. They pulled everybody off the rubble, and they hit a bunch of us up there and told us to lie down like we were hurt. They sent all the dogs in, and the dogs started barking. Everybody was clapping. Life came back to the place, and we pretended like they found us. And the question was, in Foundations last year, we talked about the benefit of a placebo to a patient. Is this an example of a placebo for a provider, or was it a therapeutic and spiritual intervention? Why did it elicit such an intense emotion in the responders? So see if the students want to lead off on that. Whoever wrote that question, who wrote the question? Okay, well, go ahead, answer the question.
I didn't. I think you added the therapeutic and spiritual.
Yeah,
part.
well, that's.
You're a good punch-up man. Yeah, I think just hearing it now again, especially with, I don't know, I thought of the tsunami in Southeast Asia and how the animals were running first, and then the humans sort of caught on that, oh, you know, really bad things are going to happen, and you know, it just sort of reminds you that we're animals and we're all in this together, and we're all part of the same sort of rules of the world and of the universe. And I think this really speaks to how we're connected even on a psychological and psychiatric level, and how it's just very humbling that the same things that could help the dogs sort of help the humans, and reminded, I guess.
So with dogs?
Yeah, I'd like to hear some more from the students, because, you know, Christine is here. She's going to give us the answer at the end. This puts us all on the spot. Come on, let's, anyone want to give a?
I think it's kind of like how she described. For a moment, you got to pretend for the dogs that things worked out in a way that you had hoped it would. That you would get down there and you would find people and you would rescue them. And because that didn't really happen, very few people were rescued, you didn't have that to hold on to. But to create it for the dogs, I'm sure that was like very emotional, because you know that's not true, but you wish it was.
Made the dogs happy.
It was funny because when everybody started, like the dogs were like, we found somebody like they had a pack of dogs, and everybody was off the pile. And then the dogs started barking, and we were popping up like, you found us. And then everybody just started clapping, and then everybody started laughing, and then everybody started cry laughing. Like it was, because I think because of that, it was like more of like, went from laughter to everybody was crying again, you know, like poignant almost. You know, this is the way it could have been.
Yeah, and I think it sort of took that example to realize this is what we need actually, and we need this therapy of feeling like we accomplished something and sort of.
And we were doing it for them, not us, and it works for us.
Right, and then it turns back, and you realize that we have the same needs as the animals, and we're sort of focused. I say animals, and I don't want you guys to interpret it as a negative thing. I think it's very basic and beautiful, but you know, sometimes all the people responding to the pile were not thinking about themselves, and it took this incident to sort of allow them to take a step back and look at themselves.
I also, you didn't say this, and obviously this is your quote, but it also made me think that it reminded you of what you were there for in the first place, which, you know, I can imagine working hard and not producing results. It's very easy to forget why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely.
It goes to this tweet that we have here. It says, during the cleanup and recovery, did you ever feel insignificant, like a machine going through the motions? This is a question for the responders who work on the pile.
How do you mean what you said, Chris?
Want to give it a, right, Rob?
As far as feeling insignificant?
Oh, yeah.
Insignificant, like a machine going through the motions.
No. It was interesting. I ended up working with one support group the first few weeks into the whole rescue recovery project. And then my unit got shut down. Then from working with the group that I was with, we worked with other groups as well. I ended up getting a phone call from another group saying, listen, we heard your group got cut, but we've seen the way you work. We want you on our team. So the fact that I had another group contact me and say, listen, we need you on our team, made me feel like what I was doing was contributing. So even though maybe we weren't getting the results we were hoping for, there was still that work that had to be done. So I didn't feel like it was, the effort was insignificant.
I don't know about anybody else, but I don't think anybody had time. And we were working 12, 16, 24, 12, 16, 24, no days off. I mean, you had no time. I mean, you were busy when you were down there. People were getting hurt, and on top of that, and it was, I don't know, I felt extremely, extremely busy.
I think after the 13th and the 14th, we all came to realize that it was going to be a search and recovery effort, and to find as many remains for the families that lost loved ones. I think that sank in.
That became the
That was
objective.
very
Yeah.
important.
That, I think that was quick.
I mean, from my perspective, because I wasn't on the pit, I got to treat, working down 18 hours a day, working on the rescue and recovery workers. So I would hear their stories come across my table all day long. So to break down the question for me, I didn't feel insignificant, but what was the second half of it?
The second half was, did you feel like the machine?
The
went through
machine,
motion?
yeah, from my perspective, because as a therapist, there are boundaries that we have to, as doctors too, right? You have boundaries between patient-doctor confidentiality. And for me as a massage therapist down there treating all those rescue workers, I did feel like a machine. Because the massages that we were giving down there were not the hour-long relaxation massages. They were the 15-minute medical massages that needed to just get the stuff out of their lungs, to get their breathing airway okay, and then to help the people who are in the morgue or standing on the perimeter for 24 hours a day, treating their, sciatica or, the ankle problems that they were having. So we would help treating them. So for me, I didn't feel insignificant because I know, other than the food line for us, we were the longest line, other than the food line. So I did feel like a machine because I didn't have that emotional attachment. I had to get these guys back out there to do their jobs, repelling off buildings, going into these empty voids. Like these iron workers, they weren't, I don't think anyone's really trained to look for body parts. And they would come across and they would describe what these, they're used to welding. They're not used to trying to look for body parts. So for me, I did feel like a machine trying to get that 15 minutes, get them back on, get the chiropractic adjustment, and feel like $1 million to just go back out onto the pit and be able to work. So to work 18 hours a day, every 15 minutes is another person with another different kind of medical condition. It was a machine type thing, but I really feel if it wasn't for us.
I have to agree with that to the extent that we would also be treating on a regular basis. We had ankle sprains, we had burns, especially in the beginning. We had a lot of burns that we were treating. And normally in a practice, I would be telling this patient, if you want to call them that, who responders there, well, okay, now you have to rest it for 3 days, you have to rest it for a week. They wouldn't hear of it. They say, you fix me up, I have to go right back out. And we had to do things differently because we just had to get them back out. That's what they wanted to do. They wouldn't rest it out. It was different.
Ken, do you want to comment on that? What was your experience as far as, or what?
On the pile and pit there?
Yeah.
I was more numb because I didn't, I never experienced, all that fire and death and smell, and everything was there in one shot. You know what I'm saying? It was like somebody just taking you and just throwing you into the pits of hell, and there you are standing around like, holy shit, where did all this come from, I mean, really, it was like, what you see on TV is nothing to you down there. So I was mostly numb. I didn't know, I just, when you're crawling in a little crevice and stuff is falling on your head.
You were not trained for this, but they threw you into it.
Yeah.
And you did a great job,
Yeah, and like I said, when you're crawling on these little crevices and people are driving on top of you and stuff is falling, you're like, oh man, what do I do?
Well, I think,
freeze.
at some point, then we don't really have anyone who really, maybe we do, and we just haven't said it, but have dealt with the latter part of being down there. You have to understand that when you deal with some things like the landfill, or when you were dealing with the morgue, and really the whole way that site was dealt with. It went from being, this great disaster to being a crime scene. And as soon as it went to being a crime scene, the bureaucracy and the rules and everything that went along with how to make it a crime scene began to take effect. And then it was cordoned off, and then it was more and more mechanized and dealt with. And there was a certain dehumanization process that was going on. When you really think about what went down, I think someone mentioned being at the National Memorial, going down there. You know, I think that most of this thing about looking for all these body parts, you know, they say that it's to a large extent due to trying to give closure to people. But I think also it's this whole idea of dehumanizing that site so they can put up their buildings.
Yeah, that's right.
They can't make it a cemetery. You can't put up a building if it's a cemetery or people remains are there. So they have to be very meticulous about getting rid of everything human in order to be able to build the building. And that requires a tremendous bureaucracy. There was a huge bureaucracy that went into place in order to be able to do that. The landfill had these conveyor belts. I heard great stories from police officers, you know, who were assigned there. They were almost falling over into the conveyor belt. They were so tired and so exhausted and sifting through it, looking for anything that could be human there. You hear these stories about the morgues. Again, it was almost like unbelievable, but it's not the way that you deal with in terms of a ritual. It wasn't ritualistic. It was very mechanized and very bureaucratized. And I think that that's what this tweet perhaps was talking about. There's a certain grinding down that occurs as a result of it. There's this, you know, what happens to people who have to participate in it, it takes away a certain amount of your humanity when you're doing that. And that's what I got from that little tweet. I'm not sure if that's what the person was thinking of, but if they're out there, they can tweet again and say yes or no.
That's a retweet.
You know, I just want to make a point about the responders. Having worked with the families, continuing to work with the families today, having worked in the morgue, having attended the burial of a third piece of a family's remains that they were given. What goes to my mind about the responders, the families experienced so much, but their loss in many cases was complete. These responders are still trying to live every day, and they're asking for the dignity that they're due. They're asking for whatever assistance they can be provided. And that's what makes it so heartbreaking. You know, because it seems we did everything that we could to accommodate the families and search for their bodies and show proper respect. And I never have seen anything close to matching that effort for these people that are still alive and have hope with us, you know. This is why the Boston bombing, by the way, you know, people said to me a few days after the attack, there's gonna be another one. And I said, no, I'm praying there's not gonna be. I made it almost 12 years before Boston. So I immediately prayed, okay, cover us again. I'll take another 11 or 12.
Yeah.
I prefer none. But, you know, we really have to remember, and I agree very much with what John said. People have to go on and living their lives. But we seem to take this attitude of, well, you're better now, aren't you? Well, you're over that now, aren't you? And understand that, you know, for different people, it takes a different amount of time to heal. And what they need is compassion and maybe a willing ear. And that's the hope that I find in these medical students, that they will be so sensitized in a way that they will be able to understand in a way that no one else could if something happens horrific. And not just take it as, oh, that happened, we'll treat it by the book and walk away. There's people, emotions, blood attached to all of this. And which I like to share a spiritual experience with the students. When we go to schools around the country, I tell young people, here's an opportunity to hold a piece of the World Trade Center in your hand. This is steel from Tower 2. So I'm hoping this will help sensitize the students as well. Because not too many people are holding the World Trade Center in their hands these days.
I have a question for the Reverend. That was very powerful, what you just said, and I agree that, you know, we do have to be conscious of what happened, but, and I think that is occurring now, you know, as an active process with us here. But for, you know, the rest of our class members who aren't here today, what can we do to sort of make ourselves more aware of the needs of responders?
I believe that what you can do is have a dialogue about how our military is doing, whether they're in Afghanistan or wherever they may be in the world. Remember, they have families here. You know, we take so much for granted. As John said, you know, we just go about our lives and we're living, and that's what we're supposed to do. And that's not supposed to be interrupted. But we can take a moment and think about why we have that freedom. It's not free. So 9/11 was one aspect of it being lost. Now, we used to watch the news at night and see, oh, there was a bombing somewhere in the country. Not our country, though. Now we have that. So we have to be more vigilant, we have to be more aware, we have to be more alert to the fact that anything can happen anytime. Are you prepared to be responding, or are you just going to be in shock? When we're being educated, we've been educated by 9/11, we've been educated by Oklahoma City, you know, we've been educated by other disasters. So all of us should have, at least in the back of our mind, a dialogue about what's really going on in the world of importance. I'm not against what's going on The View, or The Voice, or the this, or the that, but there's a real world with real people. Remember, all these runners, can you imagine being a runner and all of a sudden you got no legs? I mean, that happened all of a sudden. In less time than you could walk away from your television, come back and the commercial is off. No feet, no legs, but this is the world that we live in. So we at least need to be alert to the fact that, you know, I'm having a really good time, everything is great, but you know, what about those servicemen and their post-traumatic stress? What about their traumatic brain injuries? What is Congress doing? You know how the Feel Good Foundation was able to push and get this thing through, finally? Because they forced Congress, make a call. A phone call can be a powerful thing. So if you can, on an issue, speak, if your generation can speak to that issue and show that you have a voice and not be apathetic, that's the best thing that you can do. Use the education, the terrible education that we've gotten to make positive change for the future.
To piggyback off of your question, I'd like to address the students in the room. How many of you have actually visited the site post 9/11? Or did you visit it with the reflecting pools in place when the park was completely done? So when did you, so you must have visited before it reopened as the memorial?
I was there this summer, but it's open up as a memorial now.
I was shocked. I'm glad to see as many, I'm glad as many of you
Yeah,
did
you
go
know,
down there.
The memorial now doesn't really give you the effect of what happened 12 years ago. And so I don't say that callously. Listen, September 11, 2001 is the most horrific day in the history of our generation. But it does not, it's been romanticized, it's been sensationalized, and it's got reflective pools for those who lost their lives that day, and rightfully so. But again, going back to 9/11 was a dirty environment, it was a disaster area, and that's pretty much gone unless you go on the internet. You know, so I think by interacting with the 9/11 community, by being more proactive, showing up at the picnic that we do at the clinic every summer, or coming to our events, or getting on the bus when we go to DC because we're going to try to stop a sequester, or going to one of our fundraisers and seeing these people that we help, is going to give you a better idea of what they're going through. And that's just my opinion. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it's good to separate. I mean, granted, it's doctor-patient thing, but to try and understand where we're coming from in a more relaxed or something like this, where we can tell you our personal stories of what it's like, as opposed to treating us as a patient. You get to see a little bit more personally as opposed to a patient, doctor-patient.
Did any of you students, were you watching TV when the bombing happened in Boston? Was anybody watching TV? I was watching TV exactly when it happened. I actually saw people with their legs blown off because they couldn't cut away fast enough. But I will tell you, there was a hospital around the corner from that. Some of the first responders, right after the cops, I saw doctors. They were set up from emergency rooms with their little jet. They ran around the corner and were running right into the caskets. Something to think about in your profession. You want to know what it feels like to be a first responder? I think you'd be a great one.
Thank you.
you know.
Roberta?
Any of you guys could be pulmonologists?
I think that a lot of this is about the stories we tell and how carefully we listen and how we spend, if we just sort of reflexively spend twice as much time listening as we do speaking, we'll be better off. I spend thousands of hours with thousands of children and educators, and I got to attend a program. April is considered Genocide Prevention Month because so many genocides start in April for some unknown reason. And there was a gentleman there who's with the Auschwitz Institute who talked about separating the kind of one-dimensional idea of a hero from what everyday work needs to be for all of us. And what I've learned from listening to first responders, follow-up responders, my nephews who are iron workers, and so on, and who are on that pile every day, or for months anyway, we have to ask ourselves what our job is. For those of us who aren't in your shoes, those shoes that melted every day, the question that I ask myself, and that I've come to some answers, and I think every decade that I live, these answers change. What part of being helpful instead of hurtful belongs to us? How do we manifest your story every day in our political lives, in the small picture of our interpersonal relationships, in our relationship with ourselves, with our spiritual life, and also in what we say every day? So it isn't just on 9/11, and it isn't just when some terrible headline happens, but every day, every time I can send something to Tim Bishop, who's our congressman, every time that I can register my voice politically, every time that I can say to a child, you have an opportunity to be helpful or hurtful, how are you inspired by the people who responded on 9/11? Those questions are more transformative than being held to write an essay about bullying. Is how do they manifest? So if we each and all see our family jobs and our work jobs and our volunteer jobs as opportunities to advance the spirit and ethics and altruism and courage of the men and women on that day, I think we will go some distance anyway in telling the right kind of story. It's just, and what I'd like to learn actually is how to do a better job in schools, because obviously, the people who are teaching and the children who are learning, most of them were.
You know what'd be a great idea? If you took a medical student and let them adopt a responder for the day.
I love this idea.
And let them spend a day with each other. And I think they'll come back with a
On
whole different idea.
education,
You carry my pill bag.
Thank you.
I will carry my pill
Whether they're at home, or they have to go to the doctor, or whether they have to go to another clinic, another doctor outside of the clinic, wherever, to see what they go through, the struggle, and to see the amount of Skittles that they have to take in the morning. I call pills Skittles because I'm not a pill taker. But you got to see the struggles that we see every day to truly appreciate that the devastation is still continuing from that day because of the towers coming down to the neglect, the denial, the lies, and the obstacles, and see what we go through.
I like that, John. Did they get to feed us?
Listen, the medical students.
They still make more than us, John.
I just think that's something that you guys should
I think it's a great idea.
yeah.
That's a great
That's a good
idea.
idea.
And then they can come back in a month or something later, and then everybody can share that information, and you can hold another seminar.
That's good. I want the pulmonologist.
I need a cardiologist.
Dr. Love, is the government got to, all these first responders that passed away, through cancer and so forth, the government got to realize that it's from 9/11 that these people passed away from, the illnesses?
They already do.
Well, no, I'm saying, put it up like, yeah, these people did get sick from 9/11 and died. Some people still wonder if,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I'm not a big government person.
Yeah.
Whether they'll ever, I don't think they'll My personal feeling is that, contrary to what John says, some of what John says, the government does things because they do it almost as if they're a big corporation, and they want to limit their liability, and so they kind of do this, you know. I posted one of the questions on one of these previous talks as to whether the compensation of the responders is equal to the compensation of those who died on 9/11. And I'll tell you that it's so far off. There's such a difference between, you know, someone who dies from a 9/11 related problem versus someone who died on that day. And it all has to do with the airline industry, you know, because they wanted to protect the airline industry. And so they passed this bill to give compensation to the thousands of people who died on 9/11. Now, we don't have an airline industry to protect here, and so they kind of deal with responders as functionaries. You know, this is, you know, you're kind of a cog. That's my feeling. So I don't know what they're going to do. It depends on what the liability is. There's all sorts of other issues. That's how I believe they think about a lot of things. This is my honest feeling. I hope this doesn't get me in trouble with my granting agencies. That's all.
Well, I would just, like you say, it's a number. Like you hear 2,000 people that died on the plane.
I think it's very diplomatically answered. You say.
Ken, listen,
You know, that's all. I just want to know if you gotta get recognized.
The NYPD, the FDNY, they put their members up on the walls when they die of 9/11 related illnesses. NIOSH tracks the deaths and the illnesses. And this is how we got cancer added to the bill, by putting together a steering committee and recommended that these cancers get added. Is somebody in the government going to stand up when we go back to before and say, listen, we're sorry, we got you guys sick? No one's ever going to do that. But the progress that we've made since 9/11 to now is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on. I have another quote, since this is one of my favorites also, and one of the students, I don't know which one had this, but this is a quote from Therese, and every time I watch her say it, I get all teary. So she said, then we would get people who had such sadness in their faces and devastation. Those were the guys who lost their whole battalions or lost their whole units. We couldn't break down. We had to be there for them. We had to tell them they were doing a good job. We couldn't bring any emotions into it. We just had to support them. And the question that the student had was, this is not unlike most forms of life and death health care. How does one create a healthcare system that serves the needs of the provider and the receiver equitably? And I think, you know, I think that this was, you know, it's very poignant. You know, we have a number of people. There were responders, then there were healthcare givers. You know, we have people who were there to lay their hands. You know, we have Arthur, we have Therese here. How do we deal with that? This is what you're going to be dealing with as well. Do we have in place a system that really is equitable, you know, that takes care of us, you know, that whole issue of reciprocity, you know? Anyway, just wanted to know whether anyone had that, any comments on that.
I think Dr. Ahmed made this point earlier in one of our sessions. She said that we need to be companions to people who come in with these problems, because we don't have a lot of answers for the medical issues, and we might not ever have them. And we, you know, but just listening to someone's story makes a difference, and physicians are usually busy, and listening to this kind of suffering is uncomfortable. It makes you feel in a way that you'd probably rather avoid, and not ask those questions, and not open up yourself to experience someone else's pain with them. And I back to the 9/11 memorial, I've been there, and my first impression was, oh, this is beautiful, love it, it's pretty. And then I was with my dad at the time, and my whole family's there, and he started pointing people's names and being like, oh, I knew him, he worked here, he did this, oh, this guy built the fireplace in our house, and I got very uncomfortable, and I really just wanted to leave. And I think that's how a lot of physicians react. I think we have to not react that way if we're actually going to be there for people and provide maybe not the therapy they need, but at least the support they need.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100% with what you said. But also, when I read this question, as far as putting together and changing the healthcare system that will sort of take care of the needs of both the provider and receiver. I don't have an answer for that, but going back to one of the themes from one of our sessions before, I think just sharing the narrative with the patient can be very therapeutic for both people. I think as doctors, we're sometimes, expected to be this stoic machine and just sort of, listen to these symptoms and formulate a differential diagnosis. But really sharing with the patient, we learn about empathy as well. But, and I think that can sometimes be unidirectional, whereas I don't even know how this could even happen, but sort of telling the patient how, uncomfortable things can be for you as well, just hearing some stories about suffering and
I think
sharing
9/11 responders need a friend. I know he's a humble man, but last year we honored Dr. Love at our yearly gala. We didn't honor Dr. Love because he's a great doctor, which he is. We honored Dr. Love because of his work inside the 9/11 community, where if you go to other centers of excellence, it's more like a machine atmosphere. It's more whereas you go to Ilandia, it's like she said before, they make you feel like a rock star, like Elvis. And I think 9/11 responders react better to that. They feel like they have a friend, a family member, and they're being treated with the respect that they've earned and that they've waited for 12 years. And that's why we honor Dr. Lupton. That's how the clinic is run. And I think going back to what I said before, letting them spend a day and letting them get to know each other, because down the road you might be the doctor and patient. And take 9/11 out of the equation, the healthcare system's broken. 90% of America goes bankrupt because of healthcare. So it's never going to be fixed, but you can fix this community by being their friend.
Good. Rob? Yeah, I was just going to add, subsequent to 9/11, I earned my EMT certification. And one thing I learned was you can't pick your patients, okay? You're going to come across a situation, whatever it is, and you have your own life experience, and for some reason or another, there's going to be that patient where you make a connection because of your personal experience. And that can either help you with that patient or can make it very difficult and challenging to deal with that patient. Especially when you deal with those really bad calls. I know, like in Suffolk County, we have something called the Critical Incident Stress Management Program, where, I know for the guys from my firehouse, we ended up on a call where a police officer was killed in line of duty. It was a very bad, graphic situation. And the police officer who was killed, his locker was in our firehouse, okay? So it wasn't just a police officer, it's a very close, we did our meals together and things like that. So we had somebody from the county come in and do a critical incident stress management debrief that night. Nobody was allowed to leave until they went through the program. Having something like that for you guys is probably also worthwhile because that's now addressing the provider side. There are going to be things that are going to come across your table, whatever it is, and you're going to have to deal with it. And after you're done with it, you're still going to have to deal with it. Whether the patient got transferred to another doctor for a special situation, the memory's still going to be there, and you got to take control of that situation before it takes control of you. I think that's what a lot of the responders go through, is how to manage what could have potentially taken control of them mentally, okay? And that's one of the things where whether you end up with a good partner in your department where you say, hey, I can really talk to this person offline, off base, whatever it is, or have a formal program where maybe you can reach out to somebody and say, listen, I got through it, but you know what, I can't sleep at night because of this, whatever it is, maybe because it was a child, because it reminded you of something else and just stirred up a lot of your personal experiences. So having something like that, maybe checking out to make sure that something like that does exist for you guys.
In response to what you said, outside of other spiritual duties, people ask me, how can you listen to those stories for almost 12 years? Because it didn't happen to me. Whatever feeling you had when you were at that memorial, you would never have that feeling again. Because when you hear the reality of what these people are going through, the first thing you do is say, it didn't happen to me. I got all the time in the world to listen to you. If it will help you unburden yourself, if it will help you relieve yourself in some way, there's no more doctoring that you can do to somebody than sometimes just providing an ear. And I believe all of you will be extraordinary at your profession because of this opportunity that you've had to share. And I'm also hopeful that as you become very successful, if I should ever come into your office humpbacked over, that I'll receive some type of discount because you'll understand what the source of the thing is.
The healthcare is gonna be free.
For me, I think it's, you know, being at the monitoring program, you know, there's a couple of different aspects I look at with the, you know, my physical ailments and my mental status. So what helps me with the healing process is to stick with the same physician because they get to know you, they get to understand the stories a little bit, and they get to understand the personal aspects, and then they become more familiar. Because I know sometimes with, you know, medical doctors, you just you know, you're in a rush, gotta hurry up, see the next patient, you only have so much time for this. But over the years, it has helped being with the same physician or even the same social worker. And I think it's important to keep in mind that it's not just a motor vehicle accident that our senses were experiencing. This was a catastrophic event. So for me, my senses were heightened at 100%. And it wasn't just one. It wasn't just one sense that was on overload or overwhelmed. For me, it was every sense organ. Everything I was hearing down there, everything that I was smelling, everything that I was seeing. And it was just, it's like a lot of us describe it as like a movie. It was so surreal.
And like
So
Therese
to
said
have
before also, when you said that you were treating the patients and they would talk to you about what they see and what's been going on out there, you had to empathize. I mean, you were crying with them, we were crying with them, and that's something that you guys are going to have to try to do also, empathize with who's in front of you. Don't rush them through, talk to them a little bit. It's going to be a little less money if you don't see as many patients, but you know, you get to know them a little bit and about what they're all about besides just, you know, the broken arm or whatever else is coming in. You know.
Yeah, I think it's just a good thing to understand that it's not, you know, it's a little bit more than just a doctor's visit with the 9/11 responders, because we have, you know, when I come down to these things or contribute to these things, it's just very hard to come up with one story, because I was down there for 3 months, every day, 18 hours a day, hearing every story come across my table for every responder, everything I smelled or saw or touched across the pit when I walked across the pit to get to my station. So for me to come up with just one story, it's just impossible, because I can tell you what it was like down at the morgue. I was down at the morgue and I saw the body parts. I can tell you about the guys that came across my table who were over at Fishkill and what they saw and how important the license was or how important the keychain was that they recognized. So, and each one has a personal story attached to it, because either they were trying to find their brother, you know, their partner, or a coworker. They were just trying to find someone. So it was more like you know, it's emotional, it's physical. Like sometimes when I come to these things, it's more like somatic reactions start happening. I have difficulty breathing. I start getting the migraines start coming back. Like all these somatic, you know, things that I experienced down at 9/11 start happening to me again. So I think to have a better understanding of, you know, I'm not saying put us in a separate category, but if you're trying to understand how to treat us in the future, I think we are a little bit different than the others, because every sense organ was heightened to the max. It was on overload. And we couldn't even decipher. We couldn't even figure out how to deal with this or how to deal with that, especially from my end, because I was a caregiver like you're going to be. I had to put all that stuff aside. I had to walk on the site, no matter what I saw, what I heard, what I smelled, what I experienced. I had to put it aside, because I knew these guys had to either get home to their family, repel off these buildings, go back to these dangerous situations, and I had to put all that aside to just help them, you know, like we called it like a pre-sporting event where you had to psych them up, you know, because, you know, like you were saying earlier, they didn't find anybody. They were looking. It was like an eerie silence when they found a body part or they found the body, because you knew they found someone that they were looking for.
I think you gotta, listen, you're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna specialize in the field, but if you're gonna treat 9/11 responders, you have to understand post-traumatic. So if you take the responders that are in the room, we all have different illnesses, but we all have post-traumatic. So if each one of us were to see you for an hour during the course of a day, you're gonna get a different outcome on all of us because of how post-traumatic affects us. And the more you know about post-traumatic, it's going to make your job easier as a physician treating 9/11 responders.
And also, I think for me, because I don't speak to family members or friends outside, once I'm, like Dr. Lufton was saying before, once I'm behind closed doors and I know no one's there and I have a physician's input, I'm going to reveal a little bit more than what I do on the outside. So.
You know, one of the things I got, you know, just as I was looking through the previous tweets and blogs, I was, you know, Cindy made a comment. She was here. She was the wife of one of the responders. And after one of these sessions with you, she said that for the first time, she felt validated, which was kind of, it was, you know, that participating and teaching and explaining what her experience was validated for her, it was therapeutic for her. And so I think your comment about just listening, just, you know, bearing witness, not only for people who are responders, but for all patients. For someone, you know, for the doctor actually to believe what the patient is saying and not this, be snarky or smirking or all the other stuff that we all, you know, there's a tendency to do, really is therapeutic in itself.
And if I could just say one thing, in terms of perspective and how you deal with your patients in the future, and thinking about the real weight of this project that you've decided to become a part of. Remember, 9/11 is almost 12 years ago. But as we mourned 26 people who were killed in Newtown, how many people did we lose, John, in January? 10?
13.
And it's up to what now?
21.
21. We're not even at half of the year. So the Boston bombing, Newtown, whatever else is going on of great importance, 9/11 is still going on. Somebody's dying or close to death. Some family is suffering. You are at the seat of a well of information and knowledge. And the ability to put that in your package, your arsenal, that you're going to use to help families, and to me, that's a very powerful thing.
I just wanted, you know, getting close to the end, but there's one area that I wanted to just go into, and again, it has to do with, you know, one of the questions that came up previously. And I'm not sure exactly who came up with this question, but I thought it was really very important. It says that Steve talks about a different pre and post 9/11. Steve, it's safe to say that the emotional and physical toll of the experience has affected responders and their families alike. What are some of the effects that our responders' families have felt at home? And how do we as physicians ensure the health not only of our responders as patients, but also their families? I think it's really very important, that whole concept in general, that of the patient or the responder is not just a singular entity, but it's part of a family unit, part of a community. And I just wanted to know whether people, just what their thoughts were about that. Who asked that question? Which of?
I actually wrote that question.
Oh, you did?
And I had the same idea as what you were thinking is, it's not just one patient, you're now treating someone plus 5 others plus a family around them, and they're taking home effects. And I know we kind of, as doctors, a lot of times leave our baggage at work, right, and try not to take that home with us, but I'm sure this has crossed over for a lot of our responders. And that's kind of what I thought of, is that I don't think you could leave this stuff at the pile. I think all this came home with them, and it's still coming home. And I wanted to know what that response was, and, you know, once again, a treatment method, what would help with that.
Should let Ambry answer that.
Yeah.
She won't say anything. I said she should be the one.
Okay. Family families are completely, the whole family structure disappears. Either way you put it, it just shatters. How you would ensure that, it would have to be, they would have to be included in their health care. Presently, a lot of the wives do not get told the truth of what's wrong with them because it's that macho thing and they don't want them to really know what's going on until the test results come in or the hospitalizations come. There is a lot of abuse, alcohol, drug-related, that trickles down to the children, and the children become addicted to different things. I don't know how you would possibly treat them all except for including them all. I mean, literally having a wife or spouse or a significant other there at the time. It definitely affects the families. There's no doubt about it. It's a tremendous change, and change is hard. Change is hard, even people who like change.
Just so you guys know, every other Friday, we pay for a support group for spouses to get together and bitch and moan about their 9/11 husbands.
Okay. Just so you know that every other, just so that you know that every other Friday, wives, spouses, family members, mothers, brothers, sisters, anybody who is not a responder is more than welcome to come. And we talk about the issues that are presented to us from our husbands. And it's really good to get together because we all have the same thing. We all, like John Smith's wife, he doesn't sleep at night, so he wakes her up at 4 o'clock. And Sue Ellen's husband screams in the middle of the night. And it's such a comfort to know that I'm not crazy, you're not crazy. It really has a pattern, and everybody's different in their little rants and raves that the post-traumatic brings out in them. But it's a common denominator, and it's such a good thing. It's not a husband bashing. We have so much. It's not a husband bashing.
You know, seriously though, misery needs company.
And it's so good. It's good.
The secondary post-traumatic, and it trickles into the family. And Bob, the NYPD officer, who used to be the provider, the hunter, the bring home the meat, put it on the table, take care of the family, doesn't do that anymore. And he feels like he's less of a man. So he lashes out and he verbally or physically abuses the wife or the kid, where the kid used to emulate dad, and dad was his hero, but he doesn't see that anymore. And he only sees the shell of a dad, what he used to be. So we're trying different support groups for them. And the opposite Friday of the spouses, we do the 9/11 responders, and we let them vent about how their spouses...
Their wives are.
Listen, we joke around a lot, and that masks a lot of our pain, and it gets us through the day. But it's a serious issue when the kids are affected, and we're putting kids in rehab. But it could be, like Amory said before, a fire engine going down the street could set somebody off. When Boston happened, me and Glenn, my other vice president, we called 911 on 2 people that day. We had them locked up. Couldn't be responsible for somebody calling me and saying, I'm going to hurt myself because somebody got blown up in Boston. So we call 911. But it's these events that will trigger that, and we don't want them to see them hurt themselves, let alone their family. Because they're isolated in an environment, closed in, really from society, unless they go into the Center of Excellence to be treated. They don't go to their kids' Little League games. They don't go to their kids because they're either too sick or they're too embarrassed that they're not the guy that used to rappel down a building anymore or carry a gun on his hip.
I come from a very big family. Italian, I can't, whatever. I come from a big family. And our family is always together every holiday. We're like, the best family around. When my husband got hurt, they were gone. They were gone.
Friends were gone.
We were abandoned.
Friends back up.
I was active in the school. My daughter on the 18th, I believe it was on the 18th, I remember the date, September 18th, I got called down to the school because my daughter was disruptive and she definitely needed help. The school was well aware of what was going on. My husband lost his eyesight on September 12th. She was in the playground, the planes were flying. She told everybody in the playground to hit the ground. They dragged her out of the playground. I found her hysterical in the principal's office. And I was livid, I was furious. Nobody in the school, stay away from them, they're crazy. Oh, did you hear he got hurt at 9/11? Yeah. Crazy thing, you lose so much. You lose your spouse because although he is here, I lost who he was. I do hold on to that hope that he comes back. Sometimes he's who he used to be, and that's short-lived. And then it comes back and it's great, you know. It's a up and down roller coaster, and I'm not alone. It's a lot of us. It's a lot of us. And can you get the families together like we did with the Feel Good? It is great. It's a wonderful thing. When the families come together with the picnic, I never, guys who call, I leave my phone on 24/7. I get phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. They're either drunk, they had a bad fight with their wife. I'm in the middle, I can't take sides.
You know what that picnic does?
It's a wonderful thing.
You know, as much as we're involved and we go through the process a couple months before and a couple weeks after the picnic, every year somebody comes up to us and goes, wow, I thought I had it bad. I just, you know, because a lot of responders meet people for the first time. Wow, I thought I was fucked up. Wow, I thought my family was, I thought my family, but then, you know, this guy has asthma and GERD, and he's only got one kid. He's only got one kid, but then he meets somebody that has stage 4 cancer with 8 kids, you know? So it puts it in perspective, and these social gatherings give people a chance to, well, wow, I thought I had it, you know, the 800 times I've been on TV, I always say my injury pales in comparison to these men with these invisible diseases. You know, you put it in perspective. How bad is it? How tall is tall? How fat is fat? Everybody's perception on something's different. But that picnic really, really helps.
One thing I just want to say about the picnic, all right, was I was at the last one with my family. And I think I said to John, I think I said to Dr. Luck also, isn't it amazing how many children are here that are less than 10 years old?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
That, as bad as everything is, there's some sort of normalcy where people were able to.
They're also locked up at home, nothing else to do.
But you know what I'm saying? It's just nice to see, because I know for myself, after 9/11, at that point, I didn't have any kids. And I was like, this is just not on the radar anytime soon for me. You know, and then later, I was, you know, just get it all back together. And
Yeah, you know, for me though, it gives me a chance
it's
for that
cool.
one day out of the year to act like a kid, because I don't think about 9/11. I don't think about anything but acting like a kid and having fun with the kids. And that's what I think about it.
And they do have fun.
Yeah,
And the parents, it's a safe zone. The parents can actually sit and relax a little bit.
Kids can
The
run around.
kids are running around, and yeah.
Again, back to the effects though. My daughter wouldn't go near any public building, not even a little town hall. It was a public building, it was a Target. And my wife doesn't want to say it, but the teacher found a note in my son's desk. He had a diagrammed way he was going to kill himself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, my
From
son
that.
did.
And then when we went away, we went to New Hampshire, and we were on the second floor of a building. And he asked her, if I jump from here, would I die? Is this high enough for me to die?
Yeah.
So it does affect. It spreads
But
out,
the
it
school
does
kind of
affect.
got it a little bit better then, but in the beginning, with my daughter, when we did that
They
like
both.
a year or more later.
And my son made a memorial under his bed. He had a
He
two-tier
was
bed.
charging my daughter, the teacher clerk, my son had too much money in his desk. I went there, I had, what this kid could do? Second grade, get $60, $50 in his desk, all singles. I'm like, oh, great, come home, what is this? Oh, your teacher found it in your desk, you can't keep it there. And my daughter says, well, he charges me $1 every time I want to go in under his bed, because he had one of those high beds. He made a memorial of what Daddy used to be and how life was before 9/11, and he would charge her $1 to go in.
But it does trickle down to the families.
I think it's really interesting what you're talking about, and I know you said you had support groups for your clients and spouses and for the responders. I just wonder what's being done for all the children that are impacted. I know being a parent, just being a parent and dealing with kids is already a big responsibility.
A lot of them are
without
teens
without
right now,
9/11.
and the teens want nothing to do with
And,
this.
but even as a community, what are we doing about all the children? I don't think it should just be the parents that,
Yeah.
have these burdens on them to be
Well,
responsible, helping their children.
We do
And you
events,
know-
we take them to games and sporting events, we do the Christmas party, so make sure they get toys. I
We
mean,
try to have them.
But this is something, we talk about learning from history. I'm a survivor, my parents were Holocaust survivors. And there's a very rich literature on the children of Holocaust survivors and all the transgenerational impact of the Holocaust on their children. And basically, these things don't necessarily stop with the generation that's directly affected. And it's very important to kind of realize that. And the literature is vast. But you would think that anyone that is knowledgeable in the literature would have put these things into effect. But they haven't been put into effect. Actually, they've been excluded, consciously excluded out of our program. We're not allowed to do these families type of things.
Children.
So again, it's something that to consider, as physicians, as you're developing these things, as you're, of not only the impact on the individual. We tend to think that's my patient, but on the family unit as well. And I just want to mention one other thing that Anne Marie said, and it's it's counterintuitive. What she was describing was the stigma.
Yes.
We're talking about taking care of the responders, but the injured responder, the injured hero, the injured savior was stigmatized. All of a sudden, they didn't live up to that level of being that that good was going to vanquish evil. They actually were succumbing to it. And as a society, we tend to stigmatize those people. We tend to push them aside. It's almost the exact opposite of what you would think. You would think, oh, gee whiz, we have to take care of the responders. These are people who did things on our behalf. They put their life on the line. But if they fail, in quotes, hold it. We don't want them around. They're not whole. They're not real heroes. They're not Superman. They're not Batman. They're not people. And this is what happens over and over again. It doesn't happen only with the responders. It happens with our veterans. It happens sometimes with our physicians. When you show that fallibility, all of a sudden you're not meeting our expectations. Well, we're a little bit over. I just want to thank everybody for participating in this. Like I said earlier, there are a few times in my career where I could go into a class and feel like I've really come out so much richer than when I came in. And this has been a fantastic group. The students have been fantastic. The questions have been great. It's just very insightful, thoughtful, provocative. And like I said, I've learned a hell of a lot. I want to thank the responders and their families, for participating. I mean, every time I have anything to do with them, I always come out a richer person. I want to thank Nandita and Julie for all that they do in putting this course together and
And we're gonna do an exchange program, right?
We'll do it. I'll be very happy.
I'm on it. Good luck.
First picture.
No, I went to school in Ann Arbor. It's a picture of friends. Overdose. I'm gonna memorize some drugs.
Thank you.
You know, like you're trying to get too far. Too much insight. Change some things around.
Social anxiety. A lot of them have that facade that makes them great. That was crazy. Yeah, that was crazy. That's how bad. That's how
I'm like so much better when it's like